Hello and welcome to Ewe Sew You. My name's Zoe and this is my channel all about the crafty bits and pieces I get up to. I knit, I sew, I spin on a drop spindle, I dabble in weaving from time to time and anything else that takes my crafty fancy. But today we are talking about knitting headbands without a pattern. So grab a brew, put your feet up and let's get started. So welcome back to any returning viewers and to any new viewers, a very warm welcome to you. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we're talking about knitting headbands like this one here without a pattern. So essentially I had a load of yarn left over from my Shawlography and I've already made some fingerless mitts with them. So next was the headband. I've still got more left, so you never know, I might get another project out of it as well. The Shawlography is a 5-colour shawl, so by the time you've made it, it's huge and you've still got a ton of yarn left from 100 gram skeins. So yeah, I don't like to have stuff lying around for too long without being used. So yeah, we're going with this. My headband is about 3 inches-ish wide and it's a complete circular headband, so think of it like a hat without a crown. So first thing you're going to need to do is actually work out what yarn you're using and what needles to use. So the best way to do that, as we all know, is swatching, but if like me it's leftover yarn from another project, you've probably got a rough idea of what your gauge is anyway. I've chosen to hold mine double for this one so that it's got a bit more weight than the fingering yarn, so a little bit more thickness to keep the ears warm. So I'm working to a DK gauge. So again, I looked at roughly what I usually get for DK, but yeah, swatching is best. That being said, this is small enough that if your gauge is completely out, you can pull it back and start again. It's not a problem. You won't have done very much knitting. I knit this up in under a day, so it's just a couple of hours. It took me a bit longer than it normally would because I was filming bits and stopping and starting, and yeah, but yeah, if you sit down and just do it, you're going to have it done in an afternoon most likely. Obviously speed of knitting varies, but it's not hugely wide and it's very adaptable. So how do you work out your gauge? Well, you're going to need to work out how many stitches per 4 inches. I'm not worrying too much about the row gauge, which is looking at the stitch gauge for this, because we need to know how many stitches to cast on. So once you know how many stitches per 4 inches, divide that number by 4. Don't be tempted to just measure an inch. Your gauge might change a little bit across the different inches as you sort of shift your hands, just natural human error. It's not going to make a massive difference to the final gauge, but still. And you might also end up with fractional stitches in a single inch. You're less likely to have that happen in 4 inches. So by dividing that count by 4, you're going to get a more accurate idea of how many stitches per inch. The next thing you want to work out is the size of your head. So measure your head the same as you would for a hat. Once you've got that measurement, you can work out your cast on count. Now bear in mind, for a tight fitting, close fitting, snug hat or headband, you do want a bit of negative E, so take off about an inch from your head measurement to work out your cast on number. Okay, so with that all sorted out, let's take a look and see how I got going making this headband. Okay, so I am using this leftover yarn from my Shawlography. I've already made some mitts with it, so there was still quite a bit left over once I'd finished the shawl. So it's all fingering weight, it's all Cascade Heritage. This one is wave, whereas the rest are the solids line. I'm going to be holding it double, and I know that for a DK hat, which is what I'm approximating by holding 2 bits of fingering together, for a DK hat I'm going to need to cast on 96 stitches, so I'm going to do that. But obviously you're going to cast on the number of stitches that you would, depending on the circumference of your head and your stitch gauge, which will vary from yarn to yarn and personal tension and all that stuff. Okay, so let's get casting on. Okay, so I've worked an inch of 1x1 ribbing. I used the cable cast on, the alternating cable cast on, which is the one that I use for the mitts as well. So yeah, I've worked an inch of that, and now I'm going to switch to my larger needle size. So I've used 3.5 mils for the ribbing, and I'm going to be using 4 mils for the rest. And don't worry that it looks a little bit small at this stage, ribbing stretches. And I'm going to move on to my main part of the headband. So I'm going to be mulling together 2 colours. So I'm going to do these 2 colours first, and then I'm going to mull together these 2 colours. I'm going to have 2 stripes in the main part of my headband. Okay, so I'm going to switch my needles over and make a start on this one. Okay, so I've worked an inch of that mulled yarn. You can really see the 2 colours working together there. So I'm going to swap over and add in the next pair of mulled yarns and do another inch of that. You'll probably notice as well that I'm no longer using magic loop. I've spread the stitches out over the full length of the cable. So I'm obviously using a short cable, a little bit more sort of head size now. I actually find it a little bit easier to when I'm working with ribbing, because it shrinks up and condenses up because of the stretchy nature of it, to work with a sort of magic loop type setup. But now that I'm onto the stocking stitch, I'm just working around the cable. Okay, so yeah, see you once I'm a bit further through with these guys. Okay, so we have our mulled stripes and our ribbing. Now I had initially thought about doing another burgundy ribbing at this side, which you totally could do, but it's about the width of my ears at the moment, which is the width I quite like my headbands to be, so I'm actually going to do a little bit less of a finish than the ribbing, as in shorter, and I'm going to work an I-cord bind off. And I think I'm probably going to do that in the colour that is currently on this stripe, so that it just finishes off there. So to do that, I am going to cast on 5, so I'm going to do quite a wide I-cord. So normally you'd be over like 3, but I'm just going to do a slightly wider one. So 1, 2. So I'm just working like a knit. I'm hopping it back on the left needle. 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I've got my 5 cast on stitches there. I'm going to knit 4 as normal. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to knit the 5th cast on stitch together with the first one of the project. So knit those 2 together. And then I'm going to slide 5, or slip rather, 5 stitches back onto the left hand needle. That's 3, that's 4, that's 5, making sure I catch both the strands of each stitch. Knit 4, and then knit those 2 together. So I'll show you that one more time. So make sure our 5 stitches are over on the left hand needle. So knit 4, 2, 3, 4, then knit those 2 together and slip 5 onto the left hand needle, making sure I get both strands of yarn. So we can see our I-cord starting to form there, so that'll give me a little bit of extra length just to get to the end of the ear, but it's not a huge amount of extra length, about half the width of the ribbing. So I'm going to do that all the way around. Okay, so the light's failing me now, so apologies for the shadows and what have you. But, I've got my I-cord almost the whole way round, just got the last bit to do, so I'm going to slide these stitches over to the left hand needle. Before I finish up this I-cord, I just want to show you a little something. Now this side I was knitting the two together through the front loop, so we can see these little legs here across the bottom of the I-cord, which if you like that finish is great. And on this side I did the knit two together through the back of the I-cord, which is a more traditional I-cordy type finish, because you don't have those legs there, so it's more of a round finish. So yeah, if you want the little legs, knit through the front loop for when you do the two together, and if you don't, knit through the back, knit two together through the back loop. So if you're unsure of knitting through the back loop, I'll just show you on this last little section. So we knit the first 4 as normal, 2, 3, 4, and then we knit the last 2 through the back loop. So instead of coming around this side and knitting together, you're going to go under the front 2 and put the right hand needle behind the left hand needle. Okay, so now we just need to cast off these 5 stitches. So you're just going to slip them back to the left hand side, so that we're casting off as an I-cord. So I'm just going to knit 1, knit 2, pass the first one over, knit the next one, pass one over, knit the next one, pass one over, knit the last one, and pass that stitch over, making sure we get both strands going over there. That's that yarn split, so let me just slide that over there a minute, pick up the whole of that yarn, I'm going to pop that back over there. This happens sometimes when you're knitting with 2 strands together, they sometimes get a little bit separated, but there we go. So now I'm just going to cut this yarn and pull it through, and all that remains is to stitch those 2 ends of the I-cord together and weave in my ends, which is going to deal with this little hole here where I've changed the yarn over. And yeah, that's that. That's our little headband. As I say, it will work in any stitch pattern you like, whether it's a texture or colour changes or what have you. Use your scraps up, use whatever weight of yarn you like, just check your gauge first, and it'll keep your ears warm without messing up your ponytail. So I hope you found that useful and interesting. This is a really quick, speedy project, even with stopping and starting for filming and how to fit around other people going in and out of the room and what have you. I managed to get it done in under a day, so if you've got no distractions, it shouldn't take you much time at all. It will take a bit longer if you're using fingering yarn on its own rather than held double like I've done for this one. If you're using a thicker yarn, it's going to take even less time because you've got less stitches to deal with, which is great. One thing to bear in mind if you decide to do the I-cord bind off like I've done here, is I-cords can be a little bit more snug than the rest of your knitting. So in my case, that's fine. It's holding it in place on my head here, which is good. It's gripping into the hair because I've got quite a lot of hair. So it's working well for me, but it is a little bit snugger than the rest of the knitting, so you might decide you want to go up a needle size with that right hand tip if you want to do the I-cord bind off. But obviously you can always substitute that for a rib. It's your headband. This is not a pattern. This is just a guideline, just a recipe of how to go about making your own. So that's that. That's this project done and dusted. I can see me making loads more with lots of different scraps and widths and stitch patterns and all kinds of things. I might even wear them a few times like a hat, so over the top of my hair. Gives a nice hippie trail vibe there, which, seeing as I've just finished watching The Serpent, which is very much of that era, is pretty much my vibe at the moment. If you liked this video, give me a like. If you think you'll be making one of these, by all means let me know. Or do you prefer hats? Comments are open down there, so let me know. And that's this week's project all done and dusted, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in next week's video. I aim to put a video up every weekend. It's usually a Saturday, but sometimes it's a Friday or a Sunday. It might be Sunday this week, depending on how long it takes me to edit this video, because I knitted this up on the Friday, and I'm filming this bit on the Saturday morning. Okay, so obviously do the stuff down there that the YouTubers tell you to do, and I will see you next time. But until then, happy crafting, and bye-bye for now.